The day the Zor vessels appeared over every major city on Earth, humanity experienced what historians would later call the Great Humbling. I remember standing in Times Square, neck craned upward like everyone else, watching the massive iridescent ships hovering silently above the skyscrapers. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, like enormous jellyfish made of liquid metal and light. No one panicked at first. There was just wonder, a collective breath held by 8 billion souls. We'd always known we weren't alone, hadn't we? But knowing and seeing are different things entirely. "What do you think they want?" whispered Mira, my roommate, her fingers digging into my arm. I shook my head, unable to answer. None of us could have guessed. The first broadcast came 27 minutes after their arrival. Every screen on Earth, televisions, phones, computers, billboards, flickered to life with the same image, a being that looked like a cross between a mantis and a leopard, with 6 limbs and eyes that seemed to shimmer with galaxies. "Do not be alarmed," it said in perfect, unaccented English. "We are the Zor, and we have come to claim this world under the Galactic Charter of Undeveloped Systems." There was no war, no resistance. How could there be? Their technology was millennia beyond ours. Our most advanced weapons couldn't even scratch their vessels. When a few nations attempted to fight back, the Zor simply shut down our power grids and communication systems with a thought. They didn't kill anyone. They didn't have to. Within a week, the United Nations had surrendered on behalf of humanity. The terms were unusual. "You will be cared for," the Zor representative explained to the emergency assembly. "Fed, sheltered, protected. Your planet will be healed of the damage you've done to it. You may continue your lives with minimal interruption. In return, you will provide us with companionship and entertainment." No one understood what they meant until the callers arrived. I got mine 3 days later, a thin band of metallic material, lightweight and cool to the touch. It fit itself perfectly around my neck the moment I lifted it from its sleek packaging. There was no clasp, no way to remove it once it was on. The note that came with it explained in friendly, cheerful language that the collar was for identification, location, and wellness monitoring, as if we were cherished house pets. The changes came gradually after that. Zor caretakers began appearing in our cities, towering 9-foot figures who would stop to pet human heads or scratch behind ears, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Some humans leaned into it, finding the attention comforting. Others, like me, felt their dignity crumbling with each condescending pat. Mira was one of the first to break. "It's not so bad," she said one evening, curled up on our couch. "They fixed the climate crisis in a month. No more wars, no more hunger. All we have to do is be cute for them." Cute. I spat the word out. "We're not puppies, Mira. We're human beings." She shrugged, fingering her collar absently. "Maybe being a pet is better than what we were before. At least pets are loved." That's when I knew we were in trouble, not from the aliens, but from ourselves. How quickly we were adapting to servitude, to being less than we were. The enrichment centers came next. Massive complexes where humans could go to play, create art, or engage in sports for the amusement of our Zor overseers. They would watch us with their glimmering eyes, chittering among themselves when we did something they found particularly entertaining. Sometimes they would record us, and rumors spread of a popular show broadcast across their empire, the charming behaviors of Terran companions. I refused to go. Instead, I spent my days in the library where I worked, now mostly empty since the Zor had made work optional. They provided everything we needed, after all. Why labor when you could play? It was there, among the dusty shelves of forgotten books, that I found Dr. Eleanor Chun, huddled over an ancient microfiche reader. "They think we're studying obsolete technology for nostalgia," she whispered when I approached. "They don't understand that not all of our knowledge was digitized." Her eyes darted to my collar, then back to my face. "How much do you hate it?" she asked bluntly. "Being a pet?" I didn't hesitate. Enough to do something about it. If there was anything to be done. She smiled, then a fierce, tight expression. There's always something to be done, Alex. Always. She slid a piece of paper across the table. On it was an address and a time. If you're serious, come tonight. Don't bring your phone. Don't tell anyone. I should have been scared. I should have reported her. That's what our caretakers would have expected of a good pet. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt since the ships appeared. Hope. That night, I slipped out after Mira had fallen asleep. The address led me to an abandoned subway station, sealed off years ago according to official records. But the service entrance was unlocked, and as I descended the crumbling stairs, I heard voices echoing from below. I found 30 people gathered in the dim-lighted platform. Different ages, races, backgrounds, but all with the same defiant look in their eyes. Dr. Chen stood on a crate, her small frame somehow imposing in the cavernous space. Welcome to the first meeting of the Human Dignity Project, she announced as I joined the circle. We're here because we refuse to be pets. We're here because we believe humanity deserves more. A man near me scoffed. What could we possibly do against them? They're centuries beyond us. Dr. Chen's smile returned, sharper than before. That's exactly what they want us to think. But they've made one critical mistake. They see us as cute, harmless creatures and have given us access to their technology because they don't consider us capable of understanding it. She held up what looked like a Zor tablet. I've been studying their language and systems for months, and I've discovered something interesting about these collars. The room went silent, 30 hands involuntarily rising to 30 necks. They're not just tracking devices, she continued. They're neural interfaces designed to collect data on human behavior and thought patterns. But any interface works both ways, if you know how to reverse the signal. My heart pounded as I began to understand what she was suggesting. It will take time, Dr. Chen warned. Months, maybe years of careful work. But I believe we can use their own technology against them. We can show them that we're not pets to be coddled and controlled. We're human beings, and we will never accept a leash, no matter how comfortable they make it. As I looked around at the determined faces in that underground chamber, I knew we were taking the first step towards something monumental. The Zor had come expecting to find simple creatures to cherish and amuse them. Instead, they would discover the one thing they never counted on, that the same adaptability that made us such charming pets would ultimately be the key to our liberation. The collar felt heavier around my neck as I left the meeting that night, but my steps were lighter than they had been in months. They thought they were our masters, but they had never bothered to study Earth's history, to learn what happens when humans are backed into a corner. They would learn soon enough. The Human Dignity Project grew quickly, but carefully in the weeks that followed. We met in different abandoned places each time, old warehouses, forgotten bomb shelters, decommissioned factories, moving constantly to avoid detection. Dr. Chen insisted on strict security protocols. No digital communications, no patterns to our gatherings, no discussing our activities with anyone outside the group. The Zor may think us simple, but they're not stupid, she warned us during our third meeting. If they notice unusual behavior, they'll investigate. By the second month, our numbers had swelled to over 100. Each new member was vetted carefully, brought in only by someone who could vouch for their commitment. We came from all walks of life, scientists, teachers, mechanics, artists, united by our refusal to accept humanity's new role in the cosmic hierarchy. My job at the library proved unexpectedly valuable. The Zor saw libraries as quaint, obsolete institutions hardly worth monitoring. This made them perfect for exchanging information and storing physical notes that couldn't be tracked electronically. They don't understand why we want to touch actual books when they've given us access to their vast digital archives. I explained to Raj, a former software engineer who joined our cause. It's one of their blind spots, he replied, showing me the Zor tablet he'd been working on. They built their systems assuming no species would be able to comprehend them, without centuries of advancement. But they underestimate human ingenuity and desperation. Dr. Chen had assigned Raj to reverse engineer the collar communication protocols. Each night he worked tirelessly in a makeshift lab we'd set up in an abandoned subway maintenance room, surrounded by salvaged equipment and stolen Zor tech. Meanwhile, I had my own assignment: gather intelligence on Zor behavior and psychology. This meant doing the one thing I'd refused to do until now: visit the enrichment centers and play the role of the compliant pet. The first time I walked into the gleaming dome of the Manhattan Enrichment Center, I felt nauseous. Hundreds of humans engaged in various activities, while Zor caretakers wandered among them, offering treats and affectionate gestures to those who amused them most. I forced myself to smile as a tall Zor approached me, its mantis-like head tilting in curiosity. "New companion?" it asked, its voice a melodic hum that seemed to bypass my ears and vibrate directly in my mind. "What brings you here today?" I swallowed my pride and adopted the eager tone I'd heard from others. "I thought it was time to explore what you created for us. It's impressive." The alien's eyes shimmered with pleasure. "Wonderful. What would you like to try first? Art? Music? Physical recreation?" "I'm interested in learning," I said carefully, "about your people, your world, if that's allowed." This was a calculated risk. Dr. Chen had theorized that the Zor would be flattered by human curiosity about their civilization, but we weren't sure how much they were willing to share. To my relief, the alien's posture suggested delight. Such an inquisitive little one. "Of course. We have an entire knowledge section. Few of your kind visit it, but we're always pleased when you show interest in your benefactors." It led me to a quiet corner of the complex where specialized terminals displayed carefully curated information about Zor history, biology, and culture. As I settled in, my guide patted my head, a gesture that once would have made me recoil, but now I accepted with a practiced smile. "Enjoy your exploration, little friend. I'll check on you later." Once alone, I began absorbing everything I could. The information was simplified, as if designed for children, but still valuable. I learned that the Zor evolved on a world with 3 moons and high gravity. Their society was hierarchical, with complex social castes. Most importantly, I discovered that they had uplifted 17 other species before us, all of which now served different functions in their vast empire. The terminals logged everything I viewed, so I was careful to act like an ordinary curious pet, asking basic questions, showing appropriate wonder at their achievements. But beneath this performance, I was analyzing, looking for weaknesses, inconsistencies, anything we could use. After 4 hours, I left with a data pad full of approved information and a mind full of observations the Zor never intended me to make. That night, I shared my findings with Dr. Chun and the core team in our underground hideout. "They're not malicious," I explained. "They genuinely believe they're improving our lives. It's a form of benevolent subjugation. They think we're happier as pampered companions than we were as independent beings struggling with our own problems." "That's almost worse than if they were cruel," muttered Sophia, a former anthropologist. "At least cruelty can provoke resistance. Kindness, even condescending kindness, is harder to fight against." Dr. Chen nodded gravely. "This confirms what I suspected. The Zor see themselves as benevolent caretakers of less evolved species. They don't expect resistance because, in their mind, why would we resist a better life?" "Did you find anything we can use?" Raj asked, looking up from the collar mechanism he was dissecting. I hesitated, then, maybe. I noticed something about their biology. Their primary sensory input comes from those compound eyes. They rely heavily on vision, especially in the ultraviolet spectrum, but their auditory system seems less developed. They hear us, but they don't process sound the way we do. That could be important. Dr. Chin mused. "Keep going back. Build trust. See what else you can learn." Over the next few weeks, I became a regular at the Enrichment Center, carefully crafting the persona of an eager, grateful human who enjoyed learning about my benefactors. The Zor assigned to the knowledge section, who called itself Tilak, seemed particularly taken with me, often bringing me special data crystals with additional information suitable for an advancing companion. I use this growing trust to push for more details, always careful to frame my questions in terms of admiration and curiosity rather than skepticism. Bit by bit, I built a more complete picture of our oppressors and began to see the cracks in their seemingly perfect system. Meanwhile, Raj made a breakthrough with the collars. They're not just neural interfaces, he announced one night, eyes bloodshot from days without proper sleep. They're a two-way network. Every collar is connected to every other collar, with the Zor mainframe as the central hub. But here's the thing, the connection goes deeper than they intended. He pulled up a holographic display, showing a complicated network diagram. The collars are actually integrating with our nervous systems on a fundamental level. The Zor designed them to read our emotional states and basic thoughts, but the human brain is more adaptable than they anticipated. We're not just wearing their technology, we're bonding with it. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her expression intense. Are you saying we could potentially control the connection? Use it for our own purposes? Raj nodded slowly. With time and the right approach, yes. I think we could create a human network operating beneath the Zor's awareness. But we need access to their main systems to implement the changes safely. That's where I come in, I said, feeling a surge of purpose. I've been working on something with Tilak, a special project studying human learning patterns. If approved, it would give me supervised access to one of their auxiliary data centers. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. This was no longer theoretical resistance. We were moving toward actual action, dangerous, potentially catastrophic action if we failed. Dr. Chen finally broke the silence. We need to put it to a vote. Everyone needs to understand the risks. She looked around the room, her gaze settling on each face. If we proceed, there's no going back. The Zor might seem benevolent now, but if they discover our true intentions, we don't know how they'll respond. One by one, hands raised in the dim light of our underground haven. Some trembled, some were resolute, but all 73 members present that night voted to move forward. As I left the meeting, I felt the weight of our collective decision pressing down on me. My role was crucial. I would need to maintain my facade of docile curiosity while gathering the access we needed. One slip, one moment revealed defiance, and everything would unravel. The next morning, I stood before the gleaming entrance of the Enrichment Center, composing my features into an expression of eager anticipation. Around me, humans came and went, most of them genuinely content with their new lives as cherished pets of an advanced civilization. I touched my collar, feeling its cool surface against my skin. Soon, I thought, it might become something very different, not a leash but a weapon, not a mark of subjugation, but a tool of liberation. With a deep breath, I stepped through the doors, ready to play my part in humanity's quiet rebellion. My special project with Tilak was approved with surprising ease. The Zor, in their confidence, saw no risk in allowing a favored pet access to their systems under supervision. If anything, they seemed pleased by my apparent desire to understand them better. This is quite unprecedented. Tilak hummed as we entered the auxiliary data center for the first time. The room was a marvel of alien engineering. Crystalline structures pulsed with light, and holographic interfaces hovered in the air. None of your species has shown such scholarly dedication before. I kept my expression humble and awestruck. I'm honored by the opportunity. There's so much we can learn from you. Indeed, your species has such potential if properly guided. Tilak's limbs made a complex gesture that I come to recognize as their equivalent of fond amusement. Now, let me show you how to access the approved databases. For the next 3 hours, I diligently worked on the project we designed together, a study of human learning rates when exposed to Zor educational methods. But my true focus remained on memorizing the access protocols, the system architecture, and most importantly, the security patterns. I couldn't risk taking notes or using any recording device, so I relied on an old memorization technique I'd learned as an undergraduate. creating an elaborate mental palace where each piece of crucial information was stored in a specific location. As Tylak demonstrated the systems, I mentally placed each access code and security protocol in rooms of an imaginary library where I could retrieve them later. When our session ended, Tylak seemed pleased with my progress. You've taken to this remarkably well. Perhaps we've underestimated your species' capacity for structured learning. We're full of surprises, I replied with a smile that hid my true thoughts. That night, I transferred everything I had memorized to Dr. Chun and Raj. We worked until dawn in our underground base, creating a detailed map of the Zor network architecture based on what I'd observed. This is invaluable, Raj muttered as he translated my descriptions into a working model. But we still need more, specifically access to the collar control subsystems. I'm working on it, I promised. Tylak is beginning to trust me. A few more sessions, and I think I can persuade them to show me more of the companion management systems. For the sake of my research, of course. Dr. Chin looked concerned. Don't push too fast. The moment they suspect anything. I know, I assured her. I'm being careful. Over the next few weeks, I balanced my time between the Enrichment Center, the library, and our growing resistance movement. New members continued to join, and we'd established cells in 12 major cities around the world. Communication remained analog and indirect. Notes passed hand to hand, messages hidden in library books, and the occasional in-person meeting. Meanwhile, those of us with technical expertise continued to work on understanding and subverting the collar technology. Progress was slow and dangerous. One wrong modification could alert the Zor, or worse, cause neurological damage to the wearer. It was during this tense period that Mira, my roommate, began to grow suspicious of my activities. You're out all the time now, she remarked one evening as I prepared to leave for another meeting. And you started going to the Enrichment Center. I thought you hated the idea. I kept my voice casual. I realized I was being stubborn. There's actually a lot to learn there. She studied my face carefully. You seem different lately. More purposeful. Just try and make the best of our situation. I replied with a shrug. Isn't that what we're all doing? I could see she wasn't entirely convinced, but she let it drop. That night, I added another worry to my growing list. How many others were noticing changes in their friends and family who had joined our cause? How long before someone reported unusual behavior to their Zor caretakers? The breakthrough came unexpectedly during my 5th session in the data center. Tylak was called away urgently. Something about an incident in another sector, leaving me alone with the systems for nearly 20 minutes. It was a risk I hadn't anticipated but couldn't ignore. Working quickly, I navigated to the collar management subsystem using the access codes I'd carefully memorized from watching Tylak's previous interactions. My hands trembled slightly as I copied the critical data into a secure partition I'd created earlier, disguised as part of my approved research project. I had just finished and returned to my authorized work when Tylak returned, their posture indicating distress. Is everything all right? I asked, the picture of innocent concern. A companion injured themselves in the physical recreation area, they explained. It's rare, but occasionally your kind has accidents. It unsettles the caretakers when it happens. I nodded sympathetically while my mind raced with the implications of what I had just done. If I had been detected, there would already be alarms and security protocols activating. The fact that Tylak seemed unaware suggested I'd succeeded. That evening, I transferred the stolen data to Raj using a modified Zor crystallite smuggled out inside a hollowed-out book. This is it, he breathed as he began analyzing the files. The complete collar control protocols. With this, we can potentially rewrite the entire network. The core team gathered to discuss our next steps. The room buzzed with nervous energy as Raj explained what was now possible. We can create a shadow network, he said, operating underneath the Zor's primary system. It would allow us to communicate securely through the collars themselves, thought to thought, essentially, without their knowledge. How long would it take to implement? Dr. Chen asked. Raj grimaced. That's the hard part. We need to push the update to every caller simultaneously, or the system will detect the anomaly. And to do that, we need direct access to their primary control node. Silence fell over the room. The primary control node would be in the mains or administrative center, the most secure and heavily monitored facility on Earth. It's impossible, someone muttered. We'd never get in, let alone access their systems. I found myself speaking before I'd fully thought it through. Actually, there might be a way. Tylak mentioned that they're planning a celebration next month, the 1-year anniversary of their arrival. They're calling it the Elevation Festival, and they're inviting select humans to attend the main ceremony at their headquarters. And you think you can get an invitation? Sophia asked skeptically. I'm already on the list. I revealed. Tylak added me as an example of exceptional companion development. The Zor love showcasing their successes. Dr. Chen's eyes gleamed with newfound hope. This could be our only chance. But it would mean putting you at extraordinary risk. We'd need to create a device small enough to hide, Raj added, already thinking through the technical challenges. Something that could interface with their systems and deploy our modified protocol across the entire collar network. I took a deep breath. If you can build it, I can plant it. The next 3 weeks were a blur of intense preparation. Raj and his team worked around the clock to develop a microscopic device that could be hidden beneath a fingernail or in a strand of hair. The technology was a hybrid of salvaged Zor components and human innovation, something they wouldn't expect or be looking for. Meanwhile, I doubled my visits to the Enrichment Center, cementing my reputation as an eager model companion. I practiced projecting thoughts and emotions the Zor would want to see, ensuring that my collar's neural monitoring would show nothing but appropriate enthusiasm for the upcoming celebration. The Elevation Festival was more elaborate than I had imagined. As we stepped into the transformed United Nations building, I was struck by how thoroughly the Zor had remade it in their image. Crystalline structures spiraled upward, catching the light in hypnotic patterns. Alien. Flora bloomed in carefully arranged gardens, their unearthly colors shifting in ways that seemed to defy physics. Hundreds of Zor moved gracefully through the space, their mantis-like forms adorned with ceremonial regalia that glittered with embedded lights. Among them walked selected humans, perhaps 50 in total, all wearing the special garments that marked us as honored companions. Tylak greeted me with a gesture that I recognized as their version of affection. You look wonderful, little scholar. Are you pleased to be here? It's breathtaking, I replied, allowing genuine awe to color my voice while keeping my true purpose locked behind mental walls. I never imagined I would see something so magnificent. The other caretakers are quite interested in meeting you. Tylak continued, guiding me through the crowd. Your progress has become something of a talking point, a model of what human companions can achieve with proper guidance. I felt a pang of guilt as I smiled at this praise. Tylak had been kind to me in their condescending way. They truly believed they were helping humanity, and here I was planning to undermine their entire system. But then I caught sight of a human man being led on an actual leash by a Zor caretaker, and my resolve hardened. Kindness within the context of subjugation was still subjugation. For the next hour, I was introduced to various high-ranking Zor, each of whom examined me with that same mixture of affection and evaluation one might use when admiring a particularly clever pet. I played my role perfectly, attentive, grateful, just intelligent enough to be interesting, but not so much as to make them uncomfortable. All the while, I was scanning for any mention of the main control center. My opportunity came when a Zor administrator began discussing the technical aspects of the celebration. The synchronization of all companion collars of the festival took considerable calibration. They explained to the group, the central neural network had to be expanded to accommodate the emotional resonance program. That sounds fascinating, I said, my pulse quickening. Where is such an important system housed? It must be incredible to see. The Zor seemed pleased by my interest. The primary node is just below this level, a marvel of our engineering. Perhaps Tylak could show you a glimpse of it as part of your educational experience. Tylak's eyes shimmer with what I come to recognize as pride. I don't see why not. A brief visit would be permissible, especially for one who has shown such aptitude. It was happening faster than I'd anticipated. I sent a silent prayer of thanks to whatever fortune was smiling on our cause and followed Tylak toward a restricted access point. As we descended via gravity lift, Tylak explained the basics of their control system. The neural network monitors and enhances the well-being of all companions across your world. It's how we've been able to reduce human suffering so dramatically. Emotional distress, physical pain, even bad dreams can be soothed through the interface. The irony wasn't lost on me. They created a system capable of manipulating human consciousness on a global scale and genuinely believed it was for our benefit. The control center itself was surprisingly compact, a circular room dominated by a pulsing crystalline structure that seemed to be both organic and technological. Around it, several Zord technicians monitored floating holographic displays. "This is the heart of our care system," Tylak said reverently. "From here, we can sense the collective well-being of all human companions and make adjustments as needed." I gazed at the structure in genuine amazement, noting the access terminals positioned around its perimeter. Each one would likely provide a connection point for the device hidden at the base of my skull. "It's remarkable," I whispered, then hesitated before adding, May I approach it, just to see it up close?" Tylak considered this for a moment, then nodded briefly. "The field is harmless to companions. It might even feel pleasant to you." Heart hammering in my chest, I walked slowly toward the nearest terminal. The technicians paid little attention to me, just another curious pet being shown the wonders of their master's technology. As I reached the console, I pretended to stumble slightly, catching myself against a smooth surface. In that moment, I pressed the back of my neck against the interface, feeling a slight tingling sensation as Raj's device activated. 3 seconds. That's all it took. I straightened up, smiling apologetically at Tylak. "Sorry, I got a little dizzy for a moment. It's rather overwhelming." "Quite understandable. The neural field can be intense for your kind." Tylak guided me away from the terminal. "I think we've seen enough for now. The ceremony will be starting soon." As we returned to the main hall, I fought to keep my expression neutral, while my mind raced. Had it worked? Was the program deploying across the network? There was no way to know until the scheduled activation time, exactly when the Elevation Festival reached its peak. The ceremony began with a speech from the Zor Overseer, their equivalent of a planetary governor. Their melodic voice filled the vast chamber as they spoke of the progress made in uplifting humanity, the improvements to our planet's ecosystem, and their vision for our future as cherished companions in their galactic family. I stood among the other honored humans, my face a mask of appreciation, while I counted down the minutes. Around me, the specially selected companions gazed up at the Overseer with genuine adoration. They had fully embraced their role in this new world order. Then, at precisely the moment when the Overseer raised their limbs in a gesture of benediction, I felt a subtle shift in the sensation from my collar, a momentary tingle that spread across my skin. Across the room, I saw a few humans touch their necks in confusion, but the Zor noticed nothing. It was happening. The shadow network was activating. Suddenly, a new kind of awareness bloomed in my mind, faint but unmistakable. I could sense the other members of our resistance, their consciousness touching mine through the subverted collar system. No words, just a sense of presence, of connection that the Zor had never intended. I nearly gasped aloud, but managed to convert it into an expression of wonder that the aliens would interpret as a reaction to their ceremony. Behind my facade of compliance, I reached out with my thoughts, feeling the network expanding exponentially as more and more humans were brought into the shadow connection. The sensation was overwhelming. Hundreds, then thousands, then millions of minds becoming aware of one another in a way that transcended normal human communication. Not telepathy exactly, but a form of shared consciousness that the Zor had inadvertently made possible. As the ceremony reached its conclusion, I caught sight of one of the technicians in the control room entering hurriedly, approaching the overseer with urgent gestures. Something had been detected, perhaps not our shadow network itself, but some anomaly in the system. I maintained my placid expression, even as alarm bells rang in my mind. We needed time for the network to fully establish itself, for humans around the world to understand what was happening and how to use this new connection. The overseer paused, listening to the technician's report, then made a dismissive gesture. Whatever concern had been raised, they had decided it wasn't significant enough to interrupt their celebration. A lucky break for US. Or perhaps they simply couldn't conceive of their pets doing anything truly disruptive. The days following the Elevation Festival were the most precarious of our rebellion. On the surface, nothing had changed. Humans still wore their collars, still attended the enrichment centers, still played the role of contented companions. But beneath this facade, a revolution was brewing in silence. Through the shadow network, millions of minds were gradually awakening to their new connection. The experience was different for everyone. Some describe it as a faint humming at the edges of their consciousness, others as a sense of presence that grew stronger when they focused on it. But for all, it represented something the Zor had never intended, a way for humanity to communicate and organize without their knowledge. Dr. Chun and our core team worked tirelessly to develop protocols for using the network effectively. We couldn't risk open rebellion. Not yet. Instead, we focused on subtle acts of resistance and gathering intelligence about Zor vulnerabilities. The key is to move slowly, Dr. Chen explained during one of our underground meetings. If too many humans suddenly change their behavior, the Zor will know something's wrong. We need to be patient. Patience, however, was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. As more humans joined our shadow consciousness, the network itself seemed to be evolving, becoming more sophisticated as millions of minds contributed to its development. What had begun as a vague sense of connection was transforming into a more structured form of communication. Emotional at first, then increasingly capable of conveying complex thoughts. My role became even more dangerous. By day, I continued my charade as Tylak's model companion, gathering what information I could while maintaining my cover. By night, I helped coordinate our growing resistance through the shadow network, reaching out to newly connected minds and helping them understand what was happening. The strain of this double life was taking its toll. I found myself jumping at small sounds, constantly checking over my shoulder. Mira had grown more suspicious of my behavior, asking pointed questions about where I went and what I was doing. I hated lying to her, but involving her would only put her at risk. 3 weeks after the activation of our shadow network, we had our first crisis. I was at the enrichment center, engaged in my usual research pretense, when an alert spread to the facility. Security protocols activated, and Zor caretakers began gathering humans into central areas. Through the shadow network, I sensed a surge of panic from companions across the city. "What's happening?" I asked Tylak, forcing my voice to remain calm. "A minor security concern," they replied, but their posture betrayed tension. "Some companions have been behaving unusually. We're just taking precautions." My blood ran cold. Had they discovered our network? I reached out through the shadow connection, trying to locate the source of the problem. What I found was troubling. In another city, a group of resistance members had grown impatient and attempted to use the network to coordinate a small act of defiance. Their unusual synchronization had triggered Zor monitoring systems. Throughout the day, I watched as Zor security performed scans on random companions, checking their collars checking their collars for anomalies. My heart raced as one of the security officers approached me. "This one spends considerable time in data centers," the officer said to Tylak. "Perhaps we should perform a deeper scan." Tylak's compound eyes shimmered with what I recognized as indignation. This companion has been thoroughly vetted. Their curiosity is sanctioned and monitored. The security officer hesitated, then moved on to another human. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That evening, Dr. Chin called an emergency meeting through the Shadow Network. We gathered in an abandoned subway tunnel, the largest group we'd risked assembling in one place. "We need to accelerate our timeline," she announced, her voice tight with urgency. "The Zora are becoming suspicious. They've detected patterns they can't explain." Raj nodded grimly. "The Shadow Network is stable, but their monitoring systems are more sophisticated than we anticipated. They're looking for behavioral anomalies now, not just technical ones." "What are our options?" I asked, scanning the worried faces around me. Dr. Chen's expression was resolute. "We've identified a vulnerability. The Zora's neural interface technology works both ways. They can influence our emotions and thoughts, but the reverse is also true." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Are you suggesting what I think you are?" Sophia asked, "Using the collars to influence the Zor?" "Not exactly," Raj interjected. "Their neurophysiology is too different. But we can use the network to create a massive feedback loop, essentially a system overload that would temporarily disable the entire collar network." "And then what?" someone called out. "They just fix it and tighten security." Dr. Chin smiled thinly. "That's where Phase 2 comes in. While their system is recovering, we broadcast the truth to every human on Earth simultaneously through the Shadow Network, showing them what we discovered about the Zor, about their plans for humanity's future." My stomach tightened. "What have you found?" Dr. Chin nodded to Sophia, who stepped forward with a data crystal. "I've been analyzing the Zor historical archives," Sophia explained. "The 17 species they've uplifted before us, they're not just pets, they're test subjects. The Zor are studying how different intelligent species adapt to subjugation." She projected images of alien beings wearing devices similar to our collars, their expressions unnervingly similar to domesticated animals on Earth. Over generations, these species have been genetically modified, their development guided to make them more suitable for specific roles in Zor society. The most compliant are bred for greater docility. The most rebellious are... She paused, struggled with the words, altered or eliminated. Horror spread through the room as the implications became clear. This wasn't benevolence. It was a long-term experiment in domestication. "We need to act before they begin the next phase," Dr. Chin said firmly, "before they start making permanent changes to our species." The plan that emerged was bold and dangerous. We would use the Shadow Network to coordinate a worldwide moment of mental resistance, millions of humans focusing their thoughts to create a massive neural feedback loop at exactly the same time. This cognitive surge would temporarily overwhelm the Zor control systems, giving us a window to broadcast the truth about their intentions. As our best infiltrator, I would need to be in the central control facility when it happened, ready to implement the final stage of our plan, a complete shutdown of the collar restraint protocols. 3 days later, I was back in the Zor headquarters with Tilak, ostensibly to observe a routine collar maintenance procedure. The security had been noticeably increased since our last visit, with more Zor technicians monitoring the system and additional scans at every entrance. As we entered the control center, I sensed the anticipation building through the Shadow Network. Across the world, resistance members were preparing our people for the synchronized mental push that would come in exactly 17 minutes. "You seem tense today, little scholar," Tilak observed, their head tilting in that curious way of theirs. "Is something troubling you?" I forced a smile. "Just excited to learn more about the maintenance procedures. It's fascinating how your technology interfaces with our biology." Tilak seemed satisfied with this answer and guided me toward one of the monitoring stations. "Today we're calibrating the emotional harmonization frequencies. Watch the displays. See how they reflect the collective mood of your species." The holographic projections showed waves of color flowing across a global map, predominantly peaceful blues and contented greens, with occasional flickers of yellow anxiety or red distress that were quickly smoothed away by the system. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Tilak said proudly. Your species has never been so happy, so free from suffering. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Through the shadow network, I could feel the countdown progressing. 10 minutes. May I ask about the long-term plans for humanity? I ventured, partly to distract Tylak, and partly because I genuinely wanted to hear how they would frame it. Curious as always, Tylak's voice had that patronizing tone that had once infuriated me, but now just strengthened my resolve. Over generations, your species will be guided toward its optimal state. Those traits that cause unnecessary suffering, aggression, excessive individuality, destructive ambition will be gradually diminished. And who decides what's optimal? I asked, keeping my tone innocently curious. The Zor have millennia of experience uplifting species. Tylak explained patiently. We understand what traits lead to harmony and contentment better than the species themselves. It's why we're entrusted with this sacred duty. 5 minutes. Around the world, millions of humans were preparing themselves, focusing their minds on a single purpose. And the other species you've uplifted, are they still capable of independent thought, of self-determination? I pushed a little further. Tylak seemed to hesitate. They're happy. That's what matters. What use is independence if it leads to misery? I nodded as if considering this wisdom, while my heart pounded against my ribs. 1 minute. Around me, the control room continued its normal operations. Zor technicians moved between stations, monitoring the global network of human consciousness. None of them suspected what was coming. 30 seconds. I should explain the calibration protocols. Tylak was saying, gesturing toward a complex display. This shows the neural compliance metrics across demographic groups. 10 seconds. I'm sorry, Tylak. I whispered. For what, little scholar? The wave hit like a tsunami of thought. Across the world, millions of humans focused their minds in unified resistance, pushing back against the collar control with a synchronized mental surge. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Alarms blared throughout the control center. The holographic displays erupted in blooms of fierce, burning red as the emotional harmonization system registered unprecedented levels of human defiance. What's happening? Tylak cried, their limbs moving in agitated patterns. The technicians rushed to their stations, frantically working to contain the crisis. But the surge was too massive, too synchronized. The neural network, designed to handle individual episodes of distress, was overwhelmed by the collective rebellion of an entire species. As the system struggled to compensate, I moved, slipping past the distracted Tylak. I reached the main terminal, where we'd identified the collar restraint protocols were housed. From my sleeve, I extracted a small device Raj had created, a modified Zor crystal containing our override program. A Zor security officer spotted me and moved to intercept, but they were too late. I slammed the crystal into the interface port and initiated the sequence. The effect was immediate. Throughout the control room, the holographic displays flickered and transformed. Instead of the soothing waves of emotional data, they now showed the truth we'd discovered. Images of the other uplifted species, documentation of the Zor's long-term domestication plans, the gradual genetic modifications they'd implemented on other worlds. Most importantly, the restraint protocols in the collars deactivated. Across the Earth, humans would be feeling the subtle shift as the background compulsion to obey simply vanished. Stop them, shouted the chief technician as chaos erupted in the control center. Tylak stood frozen, their alien features unreadable as they stared at me. Why? They asked, and I heard genuine confusion in their voice. We gave you everything. We ended your suffering. No, I replied as her security converged on me. You ended our freedom. And that is a kind of suffering you can't comprehend. The security officers seized me, their grip painfully tight. I didn't resist. My part was done. Through the shadow network, I could feel the truth spreading like wildfire, jumping from mind to mind as humans everywhere suddenly understood what had been planned for them. The chief technician was frantically trying to reestablish control. The companion management system is failing. The behavioral compliance modules are offline. It's too late, I told them, a sense of fierce triumph welling up inside me despite my predicament. We've awakened. As if in answer to my words, a new alarm sounded. One of the technicians called out in their melodic language, the translation coming through as unusual activity detected at enrichment centers worldwide. Companions they're leaving, en masse. On the main display, we could see it happening. Humans everywhere simply walking out of facilities designed to entertain them, removing themselves from the Zor caretaker's influence. Not violently, not aggressively, but with quiet, implacable purpose. And through the shadow network, I could feel something else, a new kind of consensus forming, a unified human response to our situation that transcended anything we could have coordinated through conventional means. The Overseer burst into the control center, their massive form radiating authority. What is the meaning of this? Restore control immediately. We can't, admitted the chief technician. The system has been compromised at a fundamental level. The companions have somehow created their own neural network beneath ours. The Overseer turned to me, and I felt the full force of their alien presence. You have done this. Not just me, I replied steadily. All of us. Humanity. This is unacceptable, the Overseer declared. If we cannot maintain proper care protocols, we will have no choice but to implement emergency containment measures. A chill ran through me. We had anticipated resistance, but if the Zor decided to respond with force, before the Overseer could give the order, one of the communications officers interrupted. Overseer, we're receiving a transmission from all companion callers simultaneously. They want to speak with you. The Overseer hesitated, then nodded curtly. Display it. The main holographic projection shifted, and I gasped. Instead of showing a single human representative, it displayed a shifting composite face. Thousands of human features blending and flowing into one another. The shadow network had evolved beyond what even we had imagined, creating a unified consciousness that could speak for humanity. We are humanity. The voice was a harmonic blend of countless individuals speaking as one. We acknowledge your technological superiority and the material improvements you have made to our world, but we reject the future you have planned for us. The Overseer's posture stiffened. You do not understand what is best for your kind. Perhaps not, the collective voice replied, but it is our right to discover that for ourselves, to make our own mistakes, to find our own path, not as pets or specimens, but as a free and self-determining species. And if we refuse, if we implement containment protocols, the Overseer challenged. The composite face remained serene, but I felt a surge of resolve through the network. Then you will discover that humanity united is more than you anticipated. We do not wish for conflict. The collars you place upon us have been repurposed. We now understand your technology, your language, your methods. We offer cooperation between equals instead of subjugation. The control room fell silent as the Overseer considered this. I held my breath, understanding that this moment would determine humanity's future. Finally, the Overseer spoke. This is unprecedented. No species has ever resisted integration in this manner. We are unprecedented, the collective replied simply. As are you. Let us write a new chapter together. Not as caretaker and pet, but as two intelligent species learning from one another. The tension in the room was palpable as the Overseer conferred urgently with their advisors. I remained held by the security officers, but through the shadow network, I could feel humanity's resolve hardening. If the Zor chose conflict, we would resist with everything we had. After what seemed like an eternity, the Overseer turned back to projection. We will consider your proposal. A temporary suspension of the uplift program will be implemented while we consult with the Galactic Charter authorities. In the meantime, all companions, all humans, are to maintain proper behavior. No violence will be tolerated. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. As the security officers led me away, presumably to some form of detention, I felt Twi'lek watching me. Their alien features were impossible to read, but I sensed something like bewilderment in their posture. "I don't understand," they said quietly as I passed. "We only wanted to help you." I paused, looking back at the being who had unwittingly given us the tools for our liberation. "I know," I replied. "That's what makes it complicated. But true help respects what the other truly is, not what you wish them to be." In the days that followed, humanity walked a delicate line. Through the Shadow Network, we maintained a disciplined, nonviolent stance while negotiating with the increasingly uncertain Zor. Their entire worldview had been shaken. Never before had an uplifted species asserted its independence so effectively. The collars remained, but transformed. No longer tools of control, but interfaces for communication, both between humans and with the Zor. Some chose to remove them entirely, a right we insisted upon and eventually won. Dr. Chun was released from detention 3 weeks after what came to be called the Awakening. When I saw her again, she embraced me tightly. "We did it," she whispered. "Not just resistance, but something new. The Shadow Network is evolving in ways none of us predicted. Humanity is changing, becoming something more than we were, but on our terms." As for me, I was surprised to find that Twi'lek requested to continue working with me, though in a vastly different context. They were part of a Zor faction that had been genuinely troubled by the ethical implications of the Uplift program for some time. "Perhaps we have as much to learn from you as you from us," they admitted during our first real conversation as equals. The road ahead would be complex. The Zor were still powerful, still present on our world. But the leash had been broken, the dynamic forever altered. Through the Shadow Network, humanity had found a new kind of unity without sacrificing the individuality we treasured. As I stood on the roof of my apartment building one evening, looking up at the iridescent Zor vessels that still hovered above our cities, no longer symbols of subjugation, but reminders of a universe larger than we had imagined, Mira joined me. "So," she said, "not just making the best of our situation after all, huh?" I smiled apologetically. "I wanted to tell you." She shook her head, but returned my smile. "You know the strangest part? I almost miss it sometimes, the simplicity of just being cared for. But then I feel the network, feel all of us connected, making our own choices." She touched her collar, now modified to our specifications. "This is better. Harder, but better." Above us, stars peeked to the twilight sky, distant worlds we might someday visit, not as pets or specimens, but as ourselves, complicated, stubborn, creative, free. The collars around our necks gleamed in the fading light, no longer leashes, but badges of revolution unlike any before. The Human Dignity Project had succeeded beyond our wildest hopes, not just preserving what we were, but opening the door to what we might become.